everyone. So today we're going to do how to do a bird dog. So first things first, we need to get into the all fours or quadruped position. Now you might think that's like really easy because you've been like crawling literally before you're walking, but there's a few nuances on how to properly get into that position and how to properly engage your core that you need to know in order to do these exercises effectively. So we're going to go from heels to head for what you need to know in that position. So we're going to get on our mat and we're going to talk about our feet first. So you can either point your feet into the ground like this or put the tops of your feet into the ground. It doesn't really matter which one, but the most important thing to do with your feet is to actively push the ground away, like you're going to use your feet to lift your whole body off the mat. If you actively push the mat away, you should feel like your core and your glutes and your hamstrings are engaging. You should use your feet to help you engage those muscles throughout the movement. The next area we're going to talk about are your hips and knees. So your hips should be in a straight line, as straight as possible. Since my right hip goes usually a bit higher than my left when I'm standing naturally, I have to like actively push it back a little to get my pelvis into neutral. That's really common if you have tight hip flexors or if you like carry a heavy bag or a small child on one side or the other all day. Really simple to check. Just like put your hands on your hips and see if one's higher than the other. And once your hips are straight, the next thing you need to do is keep your knee and your hips in a straight line. So no sinking your hips back like this, no sinking your hips like this. If you keep your knees and your hips in a straight line, you're actually going to be able to do the next thing, which is engage your core. So there's a couple ways to think about engaging your core. You want to feel like you're actively drawing it in, like you're sucking your belly button into your spine. Now, SACU doesn't make sense to some people, which is fine, but you want to feel almost like you're using your abdominal muscles like you're about to sneeze or something like that. And that's easier to do when your hips are in proper alignment and your pelvis is in neutral. Another way to think about that is to think about like you're drawing your hips into your ribs. So instead of like using your natural position where they might be a little flared, instead you want to suck your belly button into your spine and then put your hips into your ribs as far as possible. So this is kind of natural. And then this is sucking your ribs into your spine. So once we are in that position, actively pushing the ground away with our feet, hips in a straight line, and in a straight line with our knees, our core is braced. We're now going to talk about a neutral spine. So we don't want our spine to be like this, which is arched, this, which is rounded, or pushing in weird directions. We want it to be in a straight line. You should be able to draw a straight line from your tailbone to your head when you're in this position. If you struggle to understand what neutral means, you can try doing a few cat-cows where you're arching and then rounding like this, and then try to find the happy medium. An easy way, if you practice bracing your core, is to feel the position where your core is the most activated because you're really not doing it here or here. And if you're pushing your hips in weird places, it's also really hard to feel it. You'll feel it the most when your hips are over your knees. Now let's talk about your upper body and your arms. So your arms should be in a straight line. You should be able to draw a straight line from your wrist to your elbow. So nothing like this, nothing like this, nothing like this. So wrist to elbow in a straight line, and you want to actively push the ground away with your hands. And to actively push the ground away, you want to imagine you're drawing your shoulder blades together and away from your ears. So no hunching like this. Now, I get that that's not really easy to see in the all fours position, so here's another way to think about it. So this is kind of my natural sitting position. I have hunched over shoulders a little. I sit at a desk all day. If you sit at a desk all day, if you play on your phone all day, if you drive all day, you probably have some hunching going on. And if I just push normally, I'm leaning into the hunching. Now, if you can also notice here, it takes my spine out of neutral, my hips out of neutral. So I'm completely negating all the work I just did. But instead, if I want to push my shoulders together and down, I need to keep my arms straight and I need to push them down and together on my back so you can see the difference. Hunched, natural posture, down and together, neutral posture. And the way I can do that is I act like I'm pushing an imaginary wall away. Like I'm using all my upper body strength to push an imaginary wall away. And I can't do that when I'm like this. I can do it better when I'm like this, where my, words are hard. My shoulders are pressed down away from my ears and together. You can feel the difference. If this isn't making sense, you can also try it against a wall, where if you're hunched over like this, you really can't feel anything. But if your hands are pushing the wall away, you'll actually feel you actively have to push your shoulder blades down your back. So that is our upper body. Now, our neck and our head. We want to be in our all fours position, and we want our neck in neutral, our head in neutral. So what that means is that we want to look down by pointing our eyeballs down without pointing our head down like this, because that takes our spine out of neutral. So we want to keep our head forward, but not pointing down. Look down without pointing down. So in sitting, looking down without pointing down. So going from heels to head to recap. Feet actively pushing away from the ground. Hips in a straight line and straight. Core engaged, spine neutral and straight. Arms in a straight line. Actively push the ground away by pushing your shoulders down your back away from your ears and your shoulder blades together. Hands, wrists to elbows in a straight line, and head and neck in a neutral position by looking down without pointing your head down. This is neutral. So if this position is hard for you to hold, practice holding it. You can do it like 20 seconds on, 10 seconds off, whatever you want to do. The only way you're going to be able to get the benefit out of this exercise is to hold that position correctly. So if you're struggling to holding that, if that's hard for you to hold, go right ahead and practice it. Being able to do that correctly is going to put you ahead of so many other people who think they know what they're doing, but their back's in a weird position. They don't know how to actively push out of their hands, etc. So now we're going to do the fun part, the bird dog. So we're going to get into our proper position, heels pushing out of the ground, hips in a straight line and over your knees, elbows pushing down your back, shoulders pushing down your back and together, wrists and elbows in a straight line, neutral spine, core brace, head in a neutral position. And now we're going to do the fun part. We're going to extend one leg and the opposite arm. I'm doing left leg, right arm. We're going to reach as far as possible, and we're going to hold for a beat and lower back into our quadruped position. I need to adjust my wrist just a little bit there. And now we're going to do it on the other side. We're going to lift aligned with our torso, our arms aligned with our torso, a leg aligned with our torso, and down. Now, you should be trying to get as much length as possible out of these lifts. You should feel like there is a rubber band from your fingertips to toenails, and you're trying to stretch as long as possible. If this is difficult for you, then you should make sure to check your form. And what I mean by difficult is you're either struggling to do the motion or you don't feel anything. If you don't feel anything, you should modify. When I'm doing the bird dog, I feel my abs shake, my glutes and hamstrings engage, and my shoulders shake. If you can't feel that, then you probably need to modify. So there's 3 very common ways to modify. First is just to do it one arm at a time. So lift left arm, right arm, and then the other way, left leg, right leg. So instead of doing it 2 at a time, you're doing it 1 at a time. If you're struggling like with hunching, try your arms. If you're struggling with getting your hips in the right position, try your legs. Another way to do it, fists. If you have weak wrists, injured wrists, or your wrist can't handle this position, use your fists on the ground instead of your flat hand. So it's exactly the same motion. You're going to do the exact same thing through your shoulders, pressing them down and away from your back, but you're just going to leave your fists on the ground, like so. So instead of my flat hand, I'm using my fist and doing this accordingly. Fists and fists. Now always make sure you're getting in the right position. You should always do the same number of reps on each side so you don't develop any strength imbalances. If you can only do like 3 really good ones and then need to go into your modifications, go right ahead. Go right ahead. Do your arms, do your legs, Do your legs. And if you just reach a point where you want to practice holding this position, go ahead and do that. So to recap, we need to get into all fours correctly. So that's heels pressing into the ground, knees and hips, knees in a straight line with your hips, hips in a straight line with each other, core braced, neutral spine. I've said this so many times. Core braced, neutral spine, shoulders down, squeezed together, shoulders away from your ears and down, hands in a straight line, wrists to elbows in a straight line, hands pushing actively out of the mat, neck in a straight line. You can practice holding it. You can do the motion where you're extending and engaging your core, your shoulders, your glutes, your hamstrings, every muscle in your body, and getting back into the correct position. So however you want to do that, however you want to practice that, completely up to you. And there's no shame in doing the modifications or just practicing holding the position. So that's how to do a bird dog. Thanks.